Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, today I want to talk about something very positive. You may think I don't talk about a lot of things positive, but you know, I'm here to tell you the truth. But this is something that I believe is going to manifest into something very positive. And it has to do with Venus. Venus is the planet of peace. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the cycle of Venus because it is so important. And I know the Mayans really based so much of their prediction on the planet Venus because Venus is the brightest object at many times in the sky. It is the brightest one. So before I get going and talking about Venus, I want to remind everyone to sign up for my free newsletter. Get all of my predictions delivered to your email address every week. And while you're at my website, galacticcenter.org, also check out my Patreon page because this is where you can become part of our spiritual community, and you don't need to know astrology to be part of this group. As well as, please don't forget about my galactic planner. It is the best thing out there going. If you want your personal predictions for a fraction of the price of a reading, go to galacticplanner.com. What it does is it will give you all of your transits and what they mean for you, plus your dashas. You're going to be able to have all of this delivered to your phone or your computer into your calendar. What is better than that? So go to galacticplanner.com. And remember, I have a school. If this has inspired you to learn Vedic astrology, go to universityofvedicastrology.com and become my student. So now I am going to be talking about Venus in terms of its cyclic process. And this involves Venus retrograde. So right around the time Venus goes retrograde, it has this incredible cycle, and it actually, in its cycles of going retrograde and direct, each and every time that this happens in the heavens, it actually forms a pentagram, a 5-pointed star. So each of these times, it will complete an entire cyclic process, and it takes 8 years for it to go through all of these retrogrades. Now, Venus is retrograde the very least because it goes retrograde about once every 18 months, and it doesn't stay retrograde but for about 40 days. But each time, if you take that within the period of 8 years and it completes the pentagram, you're going to find that every 8 years Venus will return to the same degree and turn retrograde 8 years later at the same month, almost the same day. What a perfect cycle. But here is something that I discovered beyond that makes Venus so much more fascinating, is I've done some research where I figured that when Venus does go retrograde. And so in my book, which is actually my workbook for my university students, I have some specific research that I did on the cyclic process of Venus as it turns retrograde. And it becomes, right after the retrograde process, Venus will come together with the sun. And when it does, it goes from an evening star to a morning star. And this has great significance, especially to the Mayan cultures, because when it goes from an evening star to a morning star, there's about 8 days that you can't see it at all in the sky. And this freaked out the Mayans. They thought this was something terrible. Here, the brightest object disappears. But then it reappears in the morning hours. So, and that takes 8 days. There's a lot of symbolic meanings under these numbers of 8. Now, another thing that is fascinating about this whole process is that I have found, now the Mayans, their cultures say that when it becomes an evening star, that's when war breaks out. Now, we know that war doesn't break out every 2 years, but maybe it does. You know, this isn't the most peaceful humanity in the universe, but here's what they believe, that it was more violent. And I have found that when it does become an evening star, it isn't as easy. But what I have found in my research project, in my textbook for my university, is that Venus retrograde, when it goes retrograde, many times it was involved in peace treaties. Because by the time it went retrograde, but 9 months later, after the retrograde process, which pretty much involved Venus from that point of being a evening star to a morning star, and then returning back to the evening star, that is where I found that peace treaties were activated. And in the book, I have the peace treaties that I researched, and one was World War I, the Peace Treaty of Versailles, June 28, 1919. And then I also, for World War II, I had the Yalta Peace Agreement, February 11th, 1945. And then I had the Vietnam War, May 28th of 1972. So this is what we're looking at with Venus being retrograde and going direct finally, but going retrograde and going from an evening star to a morning star and back to an evening star. Now, in this process, Venus right now, currently, it turned retrograde, and this was around April 1st, April 2nd, at 16 degrees of Pisces. And by the way, Venus loves to be in Pisces. It's its exaltation sign. And another thing that I think is going to be helpful in terms of bringing peace to the planet is the fact that right now Jupiter is in Taurus. And while it is in Taurus, it does a mutual exchange with Venus. So Venus being in Taurus, Taurus is ruled by Venus, but Venus being in Pisces, Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. So this empowers a good positive change that should come about in terms of bringing peace to the planet. But this whole process takes from the process in January to the process of it becoming back to the morning star to the evening star. All of this will take approximately 8.5 to 9 months. And this time it's going to be around 8.5 months. Now, by the time that Venus becomes an evening star, now it becomes a morning star exactly on March 26th. Okay, that's the morning star. But then it will return back to an evening star August 26th. So with this, in the whole cyclic process that Venus puts out, and Venus rules peace, and its power in Pisces will bring peace. And I'd say by the end of August into September, October, that is where we're going to see some major developments finally bringing to the realization of peace from all of what's going on right now on planet Earth. So Ukraine, China, Russia, Israel, we're going to have an amazing trend that's going to move to a time of peace. But let me just say, until that time, the months of June and July will bring catastrophic events, as well as this month that we're in right now in April. April, May, June, July. Look out. We've got some definite, horrendous, warlike times ahead. But it's like everything needs to come to a head, and then we will have the realization of peace on planet Earth. So I want to conclude this very positive message. Yes, we got to go through hell to get there. I am sorry, it's the way it is. That's what the planets are telling me. But at least I see an end and light at the end of this tunnel. So get ready and be prepared. Yes, Venus is the planet of peace. So with that, I think I'll close. If you would like more information on me, go to my website, galacticcenter.org, and see all of the opportunities that I was speaking about in the beginning. And don't forget my Galactic Planner. If you want your own predictions delivered to your calendar, go to galacticplanner.com. Thank you.